so you can get that understanding. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I won't be giving any investment advice, because investment advice is basically restricted to individuals, because with regards to investment advice, so it requires analysis on an individual's like personal situation, their own financial situation, their personal circumstances, family background, whether they're married, whether they're not married, how many children they have, etc. All of that, and then you can formulate an investment advice. And also it depends on the risk profile of an individual. Some people have more risk tolerance, some people have less risk tolerance, so all of that kind of stuff. So you can't do that with a group of people, because I mean, a group of people together couldn't agree on like what's the favorite color, right? So something like that requires individual interviews and stuff like that. So it's not giving investment advice, but essentially I'll be going through a bit of history and a bit of like definition of terms and how these things apply to normal day products. So when you hear these kind of things, you'll know. Well, you should be able to understand what they are, and it should help you in your own daily life as well. I would hope. So that's the kind of introduction. So first of all, unfortunately, I was going to have the slides up, but the lighting doesn't cater for that. But so I'll just talk through them, and I can distribute the slides, or I can get the distribute the slides afterwards. So they are quite useful. But unfortunately, the slides have got the answers on it, so I didn't get time to rub out the answers. So I don't want anyone cheating. So this is going to be an interactive kind of discussion as well. So I will be asking questions and things, so hopefully, people should be able to interact accordingly. So first of all, I think the first course I want to go through is really about money, right? So what is money, and like what we call, like, say, cash, for example. What is that money, and what is like a brief history about it? So obviously, if you look at like currency, as a matter of exchange and as a matter of trade, it's been around for thousands of years, right? There's evidence of it going back to, for example, like modern day Turkey, approximately about 600 BC. So they've got like carbon dated evidence of coins being traded, and I think the earliest form that they found is in China, going back to about 700 BC. As well, so it's been around in our history. If we take Islamic history, obviously, there were coins that were being exchanged in Mecca during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and those coins were predominantly made by the Persians and the Romans, who obviously we know they were the biggest empires at that time. Then also, when the Muslims started issuing it, was around the time of Umar ibn Khattab. So that's when obviously the Islamic State was established, and then there was a currency flowing in Medina, and then subsequently from there, and then we had the Andalusian period, which was very prosperous for Islam as well. So there was a lot of trade and currencies being used. The primary, I think, thing to note about the currencies that have been used, that they were all exchangeable for gold or silver. Right? That's something very important to know. Right? In all of these, so we're talking about 800, 900 years. And all of them, all of the coins that were there, a person can go to the state, right? They can actually go to the state or the authorities and exchange their money for an equivalent amount of gold or silver, right? Whatever the value was set at, right? So that's a very important point to remember. Okay, so what are the common attributes for currency, right? Essentially, first of all, let's understand. It has to be something that's tradable, right? So it has to be commonly accepted as a method of trade, right? If it's not commonly accepted, it's not going to work. So that's one of the characteristics, right? The second characteristics is that it should be tradable for goods and services that everybody wants. Okay, so for example, I don't know, like everybody needs essentials like water, bread, milk. So you should be able to buy those items with a currency that's supported by the government or the authorities that are in charge, right? So these are the characteristics. So the reason why I'm saying this, it may seem obvious, but the reason why I'm saying this, if somebody says, I've got a currency, if I say to you, I've got a currency, if it doesn't fulfill these characteristics, it's not a currency. I could just say, I could say anything, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's a currency. So it has to be supported by a recognized authority, a government, for example, and also it has to be able, you have to be able to use it to exchange goods. Okay. Secondly, the market price for certain common goods. So, like for example, there's this concept of homogeneous product, right? Does anybody know what like a homogeneous product is? I'll just ask that as a first sort of question. Anybody can go. No. Okay. So a homogeneous product is something that's basically will have the same price wherever you buy it, or roughly the same price wherever you buy it. So you can take water, for example. Now, I'm not talking about all around the world, because there's some places in the world that have poverty and there's water is very scarce, but I'm talking about like in somewhere you can compare. So for example, if you say UK and France, it will have a comparable price, or around UK. So if you take London, take Manchester, you're not going to get water that's going to be disproportionately priced, right? Because it's something that's readily available, and it's something that cannot be distinguishable. I mean, you can have some branding applied to it, but essentially it's still water, and it serves the purpose of quenching your thirst, right? So that's a homogeneous product, right? Homogeneous products will always the market will always set the price to be the same. So what I mean by that is that if I sell somebody some water for £5, right? Then let's say you don't come to me next time to buy some water. You go to another brother and you buy some water, and then you see it's actually like £1 or something for a liter of water, for example. And then you go to a third person. Then you'll stop buying from me and you start buying from other people. So I will go out of business eventually, and then I have to bring my price down. So that's why it's called a homogeneous product, because the market will set the price. So the price will eventually set itself at a level which is acceptable for people to trade on, right? So does that make sense? You can ask a question if you want. Okay.
Question.
Yeah.
Is this restricted? Is there a certain class of products, or is it
no?
Any product can be.
Any product that fulfills the characteristic of like the market setting its price, like it's a price evening out. It's a homogeneous product, right? So, I mean, in economics, they will say it depends on the supply as well. So, like the supply of it is like, for example, is readily available to people. It's within the 90 or 80-90% of the population can afford to get it as well. So all of those kind of things will factor into it, but generally it applies to anything. But you see people try to distinguish their products that are actually homogeneous by branding and marketing, and like water, for example, they will say, you have this water is from that certain mountain, it's like this, it's been purified 15 times or whatever, to try and distinguish it. But in the end, it's still a homogeneous product. So yeah, that makes sense. So those are homogeneous products, and any other product other than homogeneous product is going to be is going to have a value set to it, right? And that value is based on the demand for it, right? So that's the difference between a homogeneous product and a non-homogeneous product. Are those products that demand will dictate the price, right? So and also how the availability of that product as well. So for example, if you take like the opposite end, let's say take diamonds, for example, right? Diamonds has a very unique demand, right? Very unique demand, because let's say it's demanded at the time of people getting married, right? Rings and all that kind of stuff. It's just something that's a common practice people do, but the scarcity of diamonds is known, because the supply is very, very low. So therefore it will have a specific set price, and those prices can be, played around with based on the seller. Right? So the seller can, say, okay, I can charge you this much because depending on how much the supply is going down and up. Right? So that's the opposite of a homogeneous product. But with things like water, milk, bread, you cannot do that because they're going to be the same everywhere, and with only slight differences. Okay, so that's that. But basically, so going back to the main point I was trying to make is that the characteristics of currencies are basically those things that I mentioned. So it's set by a government or an authority is basically backs it and says, this is a currency that you can trade. And obviously in the past you could exchange it for gold, especially in the Islamic countries or the Muslim countries that were under Islamic rule. You were able to trade it for gold or silver, certain amount that was already set, and the prices for certain products always remain the same. Okay. So yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So, in the past, if I had a certain currency, then I could go and say, "Can I have the equivalent in the weight of gold?" And they would give it to me.
Yeah, you would get it. Yeah. You would get whatever the value is set. You would get that value. So that's a very important point as well, actually. So now we're going to talk about the modern world where we are now. So just more recent times. So I'm going to talk specifically about UK because we're all living in the UK. So I'm going to focus on the UK. There are slight variances in different countries, but generally these principles sort of apply to the UK, right? So the monetary authority in the UK is okay. Actually, does anybody know what the monetary authority is in the UK?
No. Bank of England.
You don't know? Bank of England. That's right. Yeah. So the Bank of England actually was founded in 1694, and that's they basically set how much they dictate how much currency is in the market. They dictate the rate for the currency and all of those kind of things. So essentially, the Bank of England removed the gold standard from the currency, from the pound sterling in 1931. Okay, so now what does that mean? Like as I mentioned, in the Islamic countries, you were able to trade your currency that you held, like coins or dinar, dirham, shekel, whatever it used to call in different countries. But it was either paper or coins. You can exchange it for gold, right, or silver. And then you can hold on to that, and you can still, and that was also applied in the Western world. So in Europe, in America, all of that was applied as well in the last going up to until the Industrial Revolution. So, but in 1931 they removed that gold standard in the UK, right? So you could no longer exchange your currency for gold. Right, so that's a very, very important point. And basically, if you look at the notes that you must have, maybe somebody can check anyway. But if you look at the notes that you've got today in your pocket, you see that it says on any note you can look at £10, £50, £20, whatever. It will say, "I promise to pay the bearer." Right, on the note, it says it on the note. So that's basically a statement that's coming from the past, right? Which is basically saying that they would issue you that note, and that note, it says that "I promise to pay the bearer." So the bearer is the person who holds the note, right? So what the Bank of England was saying is that whoever holds the note, they will promise to pay them the equivalent of that value of the note in gold or silver. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah. So that's still there in the notes today, right? You will still find today it says, "I promise to pay the bearer." But if you go to the Bank of England today and you say, "Give me the equivalent of gold or silver," they won't give you anything. They'll be like, "What are you talking about?" They'll just tell you to go back. So they removed that. So okay, that was in 1931. Okay, so they. Yeah, you can Yeah, you can have a look. Yeah, just make sure you get it back. Yeah, because you can't. You're not going to get any gold in return. Yeah. Yeah. So the gold standard, right? So the question is why was the gold standard removed? Okay. There's many theories around why the gold standard was removed, and you can search on YouTube and you'll find like a million different theories as to why. But so I'm not gonna speculate as to why. But what they say why they removed the gold standard is because that people were holding on to a lot of gold instead of the actual currency. So the government did not have the control over the people in the sense of how they were using the money, right? So if somebody holds on to onto gold, and so for example, gold was not in these modern times, gold was not tradable as a currency, right? So you couldn't go to the shop and give some gold and buy whatever you need to buy, right? You had to use currency. So you have to go to the bank, get the currency, give your gold in, get your currency, and go and do the exchange with the currency. The exchange had to be done with the currency. But if people were having the gold, then they're not going to be purchasing in the market. But why would they do that? Well, obviously the reason is it depends on the times, right? So if for example, 1931 is basically just First World War had just finished, right? People were still recovering, but there was a kind of industrial development happening here in the UK. So people wanted to hold on to their assets. So that was one of the reasons. But the governments were basically getting tired of not being able to control the spending of people. So that's why they said they removed it. I mean, wallahu alam why they actually did it, but that's what it seems like the reason. But it's because essentially it gives more control to the authorities than to the people. Because if you remove the standard, then you're forced to use that money, right? You have to use the money because you cannot exchange it for what it's worth in gold or silver. Okay. So does that make sense? Any questions on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So one question, Sean.
Yeah, sure.
So is there any country in the world that accept that you bring in money and then they give you gold or anything like that?
No, unfortunately, there isn't. Not that I'm aware of. No, because you see, that's why the gold price is so high right now. If you look at, I mean, I'm not sure where it is today, but if you look at the gold price now, it's so high. Before it was lower because you can exchange the currency for the gold, but now you have to buy gold. It's like it's a commodity that you have to buy, right? So you have to pay for it to get it, and because the supply is controlled, and the majority of the gold is held by governments. To be honest, most of it is. This isn't a known fact. There's no like conspiracy theory, but it's held by, for example, the U.S. Fort Knox. They have like tons and tons and tons of gold. So they hold it. So they control the supply. So therefore, the price goes up. But if you want to buy it, you have to pay. I think it's like 1,200 something pounds per ounce or something like that. It's ridiculous. But it wasn't like that before. It wasn't like that before. It was much less. So that's what happened in the UK. In the US, they followed the UK, right? So in 1931, actually, the UK had more power in the world actually because of the British Empire. And everything, because I mean they once said that the sun never sets on the British Empire and all that, because they had a lot of power. So the US wasn't so powerful, but the US actually was a industrial juggernaut. Like they were able to produce a lot of manufacturing, which is why the UK called them to help them in the Second World War. But what happened in the US dropped the gold standard in 1933. Yeah, so they followed the UK and they dropped it in 1933. But the reasons were slightly different. I mean, the underlying reason is still the same. Like the underlying reason is still the same to have more control. But basically, what happened in the US is in the 1920s. There was a massive boom, right? It was obviously industrial development. There was cars being developed. People were like actually being able to afford. The manufacturing costs were coming down of cars, so the overall prices were coming down. People were able to buy cars, household items, and things that they never had before. they were basically taking loans to purchase these things. So what was happening is that you're getting so much, but the supply was higher than the demand, right? So there was more things being supplied, and when there's too much supply, it's not, you cannot, you can only have like one car or two cars, like you don't need 3 cars or 4 cars or 5 cars, right? There's a threshold where you stop purchasing the same item. So people had were actually the demand was going down because they had enough of what they wanted, but the supply was still going up because the industries were producing a lot of things and they kept producing. So the government decided that because they can't force the people to buy more things, so they'll remove the gold standard. So then people basically, if they wanted to exchange their currency for gold, they can't do it anymore. So that automatically removes their ability to have a saving capability. So they will now be forced to kind of purchase more things because they can't hold onto gold. So essentially, I mean, there's a nice interesting fact that it was President Roosevelt basically ordered that this is the difference in the US. So he actually ordered that all gold coins and certificates denomination of that are worth more than $100 be submitted to the government by law. So people had, so whatever holdings they had in physical gold, they had to come and give it. And in exchange, they were going to give them the money. They were going to give them. I mean, they weren't robbing them, but essentially they were robbing them. But they were like, you can have the money in exchange, but you can't keep the gold. So they removed the gold, and they set the price as well. So they set the price. So imagine the price. Now I just told you the price right now is around $1,200 per ounce or something like that. The price then, can anybody guess what the price was? And then we're talking about 1933. It's not too long ago.
£5,
$20.
Yeah, so that's about right. That's a bit less, but $20.67 per ounce. Yeah, imagine that. Look at the increase. So like for example, they on the 1st of May, 1933. They set the price at $20.67 per ounce, and they said everyone has to submit. By the 10th of May, in 10 days, the government had collected 300 million gold coins, $300 million worth of gold coins from the masses, right? So that this is just made all that money, and then so there was so much currency now actually fluctuating in floating in the market. So that's that's something that they did. So then what the concept became when the gold was delinked from currency, you had the currency is now called fiat currency, right? So just remember that term, FAIT, fiat currency. So that's what we have today, and that's what we use today. So, but interesting in the US, still pegged their currency on gold, right? So what I mean by pegged is that they would look at the price of gold, and they would look at the value of the currency, and they would basically follow the gold value. So like depending on like how much, so gold value is going to be, it's based on demand and supply, right? So how much supply there is, how much people are buying it, then they would peg it against it. So they would fluctuate the currency, how much currency is in flotation in the market, depending on that. So that's what did until 1976. So President Nixon removed that pegging as well in 1976. So that was a very important times. And after that, it's basically what they call as a free market, right? Do whatever you like kind of market. So so all of those kind of like controls and things have been removed now. We don't have any of those kind of controls. And the thing is, there was a reason why gold and silver were used even from an Islamic perspective, because obviously in Islam deals in fairness and justice. So those things are very important. But now they've been completely removed. Okay, so that's the history lesson, kind of over. Any questions on that? Yeah.
So when it was pegged during that period between 1931 and 1976,
76. Yeah.
they were basically either printing more money or taking currency, literal paper out of circulation.
Yeah, so they wouldn't take the paper out of circulation, but what they would do is issue government bonds.
Right.
So they would issue government bonds for a fixed interest rate. So I mean, for everybody, the government bond is just basically the government taking a loan from the people. Yeah, so that's what they do. So that's how they would do it. So if the gold price went up, they needed to take some currency out of the market. They would issue bonds. People would buy the bonds, and then the currency would come down to the value. Would naturally just level itself out against the gold. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Was the pegging removed in the US alone, or was it globally?
The pegging's been removed now. It's removed. But the reason why I mentioned the US as a primary example is because a lot of currencies are pegged against the US dollar, right? And a lot of things are sold in the US dollar, like oil is sold in US dollar. Lot of, I mean, gold is priced in US dollar. A lot of things are priced in US dollar. So it wouldn't really make a difference if any other currency were to peg against the gold anyway, because they don't have the strength. There's no other currency that has the strength. I mean, even though you have, the Kuwaiti currency is the most powerful currency in terms of its value, but the circulation is just, it's in Kuwait really. It's 3.5 million population, very small country size of Wales, so it's not going to make a difference. Yeah. Unless there was a united countries were united and made another currency, and then it was against the dollar, then they could challenge it, but it's not possible. So yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm gonna go on from the history lesson now to talk about because so it's a very important point. So this is like kind of a journey. So obviously once the gold standard was removed, then you had this concept of inflation. Okay, so you hear this term mentioned a lot in the news, like inflation's gone up, inflation's gone down, whatever. And I don't think they actually, as my own opinion, I don't know if everybody disagrees, but I don't think they really explain it like in basic terms for people to understand. So you don't know like how to read the news. That is it going up? Okay, is that good for me? Is that bad for me? Or like people, often I do get people kind of asking me the question. So I'm just going to ask the question: is there anybody brave enough to give me a definition of inflation? Or no, I was going to say no. Yeah.
The annual increase of goods in a year.
Yeah, that's quite right, mashallah. That's very good.
Google on the side of
Yeah, no googling. No, that's very good, mashallah. So it is the annual increase of certain goods. So basically, what the inflation measure in the UK okay, I'm going to go a little bit more history, but it was basically previously, let's say last 10 years ago, it was based on retail price index, right? So RPI, maybe you've heard of the term. So the retail price index was used as a measure of inflation, and then now they've changed it to the CPI, which is the consumer price index. Right? So the retail price index is basically the value of basically a basket of goods. Right? So what they did is they looked at essentially what are the goods that people need as essentials, right? So they basically put as basic food like bread, potatoes, fruit, beverages like water, juices, milk, coffee, and like housing costs like electricity, water, all of that. So basically, what they did is they took all of that. And they put it into a virtual basket, and they said, okay, the unit price of all of this, based on a geometric mean, and I will explain all these terms, but based on a geometric mean is basically the retail price index, and this will either go up or down, and there'll be a measure of the value of the currency. So the value of the pound would be based on that. right? So that's really how it's run. So I'll just give an example or two to kind of show how this is like worked out, just so people can sort of understand. So can anybody tell me how the mode is worked out on GCSE level maths here?
Common number.
Yeah. And median?
One in the middle.
Middle. Yeah. And the mean?
Average.
Well, there's average.
The numbers added up divided by how many there are.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, okay, cool. So sum of x divided by m. Yeah. Okay, so those are the three. So let's just discuss what are the advantage and disadvantage of these, right? So in terms of mode, right? What is the main disadvantage? Just anybody can say the main disadvantage of using a mode as a calculation for average. Can anybody think of? No? Okay.
Disregards the most and
Sorry?
least. Disregards the most and least.
Well, sort of, yeah. But I mean, basically, what it's saying is that it won't look at the difference. So if you have, so for example, let's say you have let's say 4, and you have 1, and you have 1,000, right? So the mode will be 4, right? Because that's the most common occurring. But it's not really an average of these numbers because it's quite skewed towards 4, right? So that's basically one of the main disadvantages. But if you have a set that's quite sort of similar, then you can use it. What would be the disadvantage of median?
You're only looking at the middle numbers? Or
Yeah, that's right. It's a similar thing. So essentially, you will look at the middle number only, but that doesn't give you the breadth of the data set, and the mean as well is. I mean, I'll just explain. With the mean, it can be affected heavily by one number. So if so for example, if you have like 4, 3, 2, 24, so that 24 will massively impact the mean. But it's not really the kind of average, right? We're looking at. So that's just the basic revision. So let's just rub this up. So. So what I said was basically RPI, which is the retail price index. The retail price index uses a geometric mean, right? So the geometric mean is a more, I think, it's a more fair calculation of an average. So basically, the geometric mean is basically the sum of the numbers that are in your data set, rooted by the number of the count of the numbers that you have. So I've got a few examples. So for example, if we have 2 numbers, right? So we have a data set of 2. So you have 2 and 8. Okay. So what you do is basically take the product of 2 and 8. So 2 times 8, so 16. And then because there's 2 numbers, you basically square root it. So you get 4. Okay. So it's a more fairer representation of the average. So that's just geometric mean. So I just wanted to explain that because that's so what they would do in for RPI calculation, i.e. retail price index, they basically look at the price of those goods that I mentioned earlier. So for example, like I said, you have water, bread, potatoes, all of that. So they will take that price. So for example, the price of bread is £2. The price of whatever is 8, and that's it. And then so they'll work it all out on the basket, and then they'll come up with a figure. And it's basically RPI is a time series, right? So what I mean by time series is time and price. So it basically moves with the price. So whatever that value, let's say is 4, that'll be 4 at a specific point in time, and then it moves, right? So that's RPI. Okay, so you have to look at it in terms of time. It's not like something that's static. There you go.
So each of those, are the 2 and the 8 there, talking about a basket of goods here, are we?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Like that's an orange and that's an apple, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah.
And then you get like a whole bunch of them and...
Yeah, I mean, obviously the RPI calculation is way more advanced. But like, if you have let's say like 3 numbers. Let's say you have 1, 4, and then let's say another example. Yeah, 16. Right. So you do 1 times 4 times 16, 64, and then you'll have to cube root that. So I think that's 4 as well. Yeah, 4. 4. Yeah. So so each number represents one of the items in the basket of goods, and then that's your RPI value at whenever you calculate it. So if you calculate it today, that'll be the price today.
And the reason we use geometric average is because it's more representative than the other.
It's known to, over large data sets is known to be a better representative of the average value, right? So yeah. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Yeah. Because I mean the concepts are like using like terms and stuff, but like it's basic mathematics. If you actually break it down to the bare bones. Okay, so that's geometric average. But consumer price index. So I remember I mentioned consumer price index. So consumer price index is what's used now, right? Today in the modern world today. Well, in UK predominantly, the consumer price index is used. And the consumer price index is not based on it's not based on the geometric average, but it's actually based on a weighted average. Okay, so the weighted average is slightly different, but I'll get into that in a second. So essentially, so what's in the consumer price index? Consumer price index also has a basket of goods as well, right? But it's a wider set. So what the government, they basically came to realization, they thought that the basket of goods that were in the RPI wasn't really a good representative set of what people needed as a demand, right? What they wanted essentially to use to be able to live. Because obviously people's lifestyle changes with time and stuff like that. Obviously the essentials always remain, like your water, your potatoes, your bread will always be at home. You'll have that, and milk as well. Everyone has that at home because that's like there's essential goods. Even if you're living in a developed country, that those are the essential goods. But they basically made it wider. I mean, if you want to go and read what's in the CPI exactly, you can go on the Office of National Statistics, ONS, and they give the definition there. You can see all of the graphs and everything, how it's calculated as a reference point. But I mean, I can give the slides to you guys as well, so you can have a look at that. But essentially, they call it, the CPI is a measure of cost of living. Okay, so that's what you need to know, and it's based on weighted average. Let's go to an example here. So if we take let's say we take an example weighting of 1 to 10. Okay, so this is like a range, right? And we apply it to like three items. Let's say we have milk. We have bread, and we have water. So let's say we will weight these in terms of importance, right? So obviously water is the most important thing. So if we give that a 7, right? I've got it down here as well. Let's say bread, give it a 5. Milk a 3 because some people are lactose intolerant, so give it a 3. That's your weighting. So the weighted average will also be based on a mean, but it will be weighted. So it will be basically the price of milk. So let's say this is P1, price of bread P2, and the price of water P3. So it will just be 3 times P1 and plus 5 times P2 plus 7 times P3, yeah, divided by the sum of that. So basically it's the mean, but it's weighted. So you're adding weights to everything. So that's how weighted average is calculated. And the CPI is based on a weighted average. Okay. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Yeah. Go.
Who says the weights?
Who decides the weights? The government decides the weights. Yeah. So I think is the way the weights are decided is based on like surveys and censuses and like studies that they do, and I think they base it on that. But yeah, it's the government will decide the weight. So yeah.
So basically, if the government feels that bread's more important than milk, they'll
Yeah,
raise the weight.
that's it. But they will look at evidence based on like what people are purchasing and how much people are purchasing. So they will look at it from that perspective as well. Yeah, I mean there'll be statistical analysis on that. Yeah. Okay, so that's that. So let's get into some more fun stuff in terms of like application on real life. Okay, so does anybody know what the does anybody know what the RPI was, like retail price index was in July 2020? Sort of like, coronavirus time. Any idea? No, that's fine. It was basically 1.6. It was 1.6%. Yeah. Okay. Does anybody know what it was in August this year?
5%.
Very close. 4.8. 4.8%. Same. Does anybody know for CPI? Roughly.
3%?
It was 3.2. And now it's sorry, I got that wrong. It was 1%. Now it's 3.2. Okay, so basically, as you can see, both of them went up, but the CPI went up less, and the RPI went up by more in the same time period. Okay, so can anybody think of why that would be? Like the general reason. There's a lot of reasons, but generally.
Consumer spending.
Consumer spending, yeah, that's one.
Money printing.
Yeah, that's a general, but like in relation to the two, because remember the same thing is going to affect both, right? Essentially, but so why would one go up more than the other? Like,
because the weightings.
no, you're on the right track.
The weighting has changed. So what was deemed to have a higher weighting now has a lower weighting.
Sort of, but basically because the CPI is worked out on a bigger basket of goods, so the impact is gonna be less, right? So on the value, because it's a wider set, because the RPI is less. So that's one of the main underlying reasons. But you were right as well. Sorry, you were right. Yeah. But essentially, the general thing is that the value of our money now is worth much less than what it was in last year. So that's essentially it because of these increases in inflation, right? So like in terms of investment terms, how does that work, right? So in terms of investment terms, what they say is that there should be an inverse relationship between the amount of cash that you hold and the RPI or CPI. Okay. So that's really what they say in terms of investment principles. So basically, to keep it simpler, the higher the rate of inflation, the less cash you should hold, right? Because it's worth less. So why would you want to hold something that's worth less?
They want you to invest your money or put it in the, I don't know, buy something with it. Just hold less.
Yeah. But you should hold less cash if it's worth less, because if from a natural point you're not going to hold something that's less value. You're going to hold something that's more value. That's just a common thing. So you want to exchange your money for something else. Right? What that's something else, we'll go into that. But I'm just gonna round up a bit. But it's just one very important point to note is what is the main source of money for a family is income, right? Essentially everybody kind of works here, assuming, or people are studying or whatever, but your job or your business is your primary source of money, right? So let's assume that I just want to give one more example. Let's say in July 2020, right? Let's say your salary was 40K. Okay. And then in August, so that's this 1 year, it's gone up to 50K, right? They give you a pay rise, say, good job, 50K. So what's the percentage increase? It's 25%. Okay. But looking at that, is it really 25%? What they will tell you is 25%. That's what your employer will tell you. You got 25% pay rise. But is it really 25%? It's not. It's not 25%. It's less than 25, right? So it's essentially that's it. But do we do this? Like that's my point. Like, do we when we go into negotiation with an employer, do we do this kind of stuff? Like we should be doing these kind of things to tell the employer, have you factored into effect the rate of inflation? And if you have those figures at hand, you can have a better negotiation with your employer than that. But essentially, So the real increase is 21%. I mean, I'll save you the maths, but it's 21%. Based on CPI. So that's exactly what you're getting. So it's not really 10,000. What you're getting is actually it's 8.4K. So the value of your money, because of the loss of the value of your money, you're actually not getting 10,000. You're getting 8.4K if you look at it in terms of July 2020. In August 2021, your 50K is basically worth much less than it was in last year, and you're actually getting an 8.4K bonus. So you just have to look at it from that perspective. Sorry, look confused. There's a question.
Maybe at the end is probably better at the end. I'll know the math.
No, I'm just finishing up now anyway. So go on.
Okay.
Yeah. No, go on. Ask the question.
I want to know the actual maths of how you did that.
Oh, the maths. Okay, I can change the maths. So, it's quite a long one. It'll take me like 10 minutes to write it down, but I can explain it to you. Yeah. Sorry. Go.
So is that why most of the business went out of? They couldn't manage the business and collapse.
No, I mean, I think that the factors of business collapse is there's a lot of other factors accordingly, but I mean, obviously this is something that's that people don't actually factor in to what they're doing. But what you will see is that the price of things will seem more expensive. You feel like that I'm buying this stuff, I'm bringing it home, and I've got no money left, or whatever, like less than before. That's it, because the value of your money has gone down essentially, yeah, and the actual supply of money in the market has gone up, so the value has gone down, and there's more. So that's the basic effect of inflation. But I just wanted to give the wage example as something for people to consider as a point, when you go, because employers should factor in, according to like the government guidance, they should factor in, the inflation in your wages, because you have to pay more anyway. They don't factor it into for bread and milk, you still have to pay more. They're not going to reduce that, but they could actually undersell that to you, because they're not legally obliged to.
Is that increase abnormal then, compared to normal like history? If you look at like the last 5-6 years, so
Yeah.
that's increased from last year to this year. It's so high.
Well, yeah. So it's a higher increase, yeah, because obviously it's a very unique situation, right? Last year, because of the coronavirus, it's a very unique situation. So that's why I guess that's the reason. But there have been historically bigger jumps than this. But if you look at 2007, 2008 financial crisis happened, and cyclically, if you look at obviously 1931 Great Depression in the US, there's this kind of situations that have happened before. But what they tell you is that we're living in the best time, is the most amount of money, most amount of wealth, and everything. But essentially, it's not really the case. Yeah. But I think that's it for now. I've kind of gone over my time, but I mean it's good to get these examples in there as well. So any more questions? Okay. Yeah.
Did you only just factor in the CPI to calculate that?
Yeah, CPI. Yeah.
And why not? Why didn't you use R for the?
Because that's what they use today. So it's more accurate. But you can use RPI as well. You get a bigger fluctuation with RPI because the fluctuation was bigger, so you'll get a bigger hit. But because CPI is the common thing. But like if I were to do this, like for myself, I mean I have my own business, but if I were to do this, if I was employed by someone and I was to do this, I would look at both. I would look at both, and I would say, okay, this is the situation, and that's, and depending on what I need, because what's more important to me, right, is determines what I look at RPI and CPI from the basket of goods. That makes sense. If you look at the basket of goods, what's more important to you? Like if you look at, say, because the CPI has got museum costs in there, right? But like, how many people really go to a museum? But they're factored in because apparently in the UK, a lot of people go to museums, but they have it as an essential good and they put it in there. So do you want to take the CPI as a measure? So that's your prerogative, because it depends on like what you regard from the basket of goods as most important. You can formulate your own one, right, to make your assessment. You don't have to base it on there. You can say, look, these are the 5 things that I require more essentially, and then you can see, because this is all it's all arbitrary, right? Because it's all mathematics. But you have to see. Essentially, this should help you inform how much cash you keep. Essentially, that's the point I'm trying to get at. It should help you to know how much cash you should hold in your bank account or in your under your mattress or wherever you put it. Like keep it wherever it is. So that's the thing. Sorry, you had a question. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I just double checked. I think
Yeah.
it was 71 when Nixon.
Was it 71?
Elected, yeah, from the
Okay.
board.
Okay, fair enough. 71. Okay, I heard it was 76. But yeah, okay, fair enough. Good point.
Yeah, I've got a question. Basically, if you're not going to keep cash with you, what are you going to do with the cash? What are you going to buy?
That's the next lessons. we'll cover that in next lesson.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah. I was waiting for someone to ask that question. It's a good question. Yeah. Sorry.
Could the inflation rate be manipulated so that they know these are the goods that will kind of keep the inflation rate down? Why wouldn't they have an incentive to kind of keep those prices down as well if those goods have that weight?
In theory, it can be manipulated, but can anybody prove it? That's the thing. Nobody can prove it. Yeah. So in theory, you can. Yeah. Because if you have control over the price of those basket of goods, then you can do that, right? You can say it.
Because I know they've included iPads and tablets into the
They've included
the
that.
basket of goods.
Yeah. Because there was a big case about there was a big issue with that, right? Because now you're dealing with corporations, right? Because you got Apple now, so that's they have a big influence. Apple is the biggest company in the world. They have an influence. They could kind of say, okay, well put this price in or something like that. So there is concerns on that, but you can't prove it. There's no way to prove it. That's the thing.
And even the definition of inflation, apparently it used to be different. I think they've changed it.
They have changed it. I won't go into that, but just for take it as it is for now. Like that's what they're using. Yeah.
So just to summarise, when I see these RPI and CPI values, I can plot them on a graph. I can look at the graphs, and I can sort of watch for trends and try and make decisions about how much cash I should hold.
That's the most clever way to do things. Yeah. I mean, you would you would look at a graph over time. You can look at a couple of time series, like 5 years, 1 year, 1 quarter, 1 month, and then you look at your wage against that, because you look at all your income, right? So your income is primarily your wage. You could have multiple sources of income, but look at your primary 90% of how you're earning your money, and then look at it against the graph, and then you see how much cash you should be holding, and then obviously look at future, how much earnings you're getting in the future as well. Yeah.